All right, and welcome to Hattrick Sports Talk, a special, what is this, Wednesday edition of Hattrick Sports Talk at the request of our resident hockey analyst, Brandon. How are you doing, man?
I'm pretty great. You could say that it's always a good day when you get to say, "What's cracking" to a new NHL team. In this case, it's saying, "What's cracking?" Uh, yes, I've been thinking about that joke for a while.
Oh.
You know, don't judge me. It's it.
I think we can't judge you as harshly after that honestly really terrible performance by Chris Fowler today.
I mean, look, Chris Fowler, he's just kind of.
Why is he even there? I mean, we'll get to it, but
Well, I think the problem is ESPN doesn't exactly have they don't have a hockey guy yet.
I mean, do they still have that guy who's like really old, who's like a
Oh,
awesome?
like Bootygrass or whatever his name is, the guy
Yeah,
who does yeah, I think they still have him, but he was probably like I don't want to go to Seattle.
I mean, he doesn't need to. He could do it
Yeah,
virtually,
he could have
though.
just. I thought they were going to be doing Sports Center from there, which would have been kind of cool. But yeah, it it seems like a lot of people have different opinions on the team on our draft. I think. Look, here's the thing: we all knew we weren't about to like reach into a hat and pull out like a stacked team. Uh, and that's the thing: hockey teams, when you look at them, they're not really like you know here. They're not really stacked. Like you
Like
have
Tampa.
teams, right?
I mean,
The
just
best
Tampa.
teams, right? Tampa's really the only like stacked team, and they're not going to be like that for a while. Because if I'm going to be honest, I have a feeling the NHL is going to be like, wait a minute, that's cheating.
I mean, it is. They were negative
It
18 in the
yeah.
cap.
I mean the rules allow for what they were doing, so but I there were some interesting players that were left open, and
Yeah, left on the board.
there were some interesting picks by Seattle of who they took, and there were definitely some players they took that felt very much like other teams slipping a bribe to them, being like, hey, we'll pay you not to take this player.
I mean, that's also kind of the case is like some of these guys had no waive clauses. Some of the guys, they kind of just knew like, oh, we're not going to take them or whatever. Now, obviously, this roster isn't official. We already heard from Pierre LeBron that there are going to be some trades done during Friday's NHL draft, which we'll talk a little bit about. But let's first talk about the guys that weren't picked, namely
Right.
Carey Price and Vladimir Tarasenko.
Look,
Is that money for you? Because I think with Carey Price, it was.
So
We talked about it that he got
right,
10.5 million
right.
per year for the next 5 years, going after surgery this summer. He's 34, 35.
Yeah.
So with the price thing, I kind of get. Tarasenko is weird because a lot of teams wanted him to draft and then trade him, which did not occur.
Tarasenko, to me, so we'll start with Tarasenko. Tarasenko to me is an example probably of the Blues being like, hey, don't take him. We'll pay you, please.
Yeah, just we'll trade him.
We'll trade please do not don't take him. We'll give you something for him. We'll give you. Well, I bet you they got money for that deal.
Something. I'm sure
they're gonna get something from, because there's no way a team passes up on a player like Tarasenko that's just sitting there, unless two things: one, money, but his contract really wasn't that big.
I can look it up.
And two, maybe there's a hidden injury thing going on there.
He just wants to get moved.
And
is basically
and with Carey Price, that I was that I was excited for Price. I kind of wanted Price. But the more I thought about it, the more I went, why would the Habs put Carey Price on the market and have him and why would Carey Price like waive his no move clause?
Waive clause, yeah.
And the more I think about it, the more I had to go, I feel like this is just this was a like supposed to be a bait and switch. Because this man is definitely not playing next year. Apparently, towards the end of the season, he started dealing with hip issues. He played very little this season. Like, he had very little playtime this season. Last season, he had very little playtime. The season before that, he had very little playtime. If you look at him as a goalie, he was great in his early career. He's on the decline.
Making $10.5 million.
Honestly, a worse GM probably would have been like, oh my God, big name, has connections to Seattle, has connections to Washington. Yes, you'd be taking a lot of money. You'd be taking a huge swing at him. Honestly, I don't hate it because in replace of that, we got 3 middle-of-the-road goalies, 2 of whom can compete right away for the starting job. The other guy will be a great backup. And the third guy...
do you think they'll be rotational?
I wouldn't be shocked, but I think Dredger will probably be the starter. I think they're going to the way they were pushing him, like putting on like in the media today, because like during the show, I heard him both on 710 and 950. I believe he will end up being their main guy.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll give the other guy a chance, but I also believe the other guy, I believe, was more of a pickup to trade. Because you know
Which
how
we'll
it
see.
is. You know how it is in the NHL. A lot of guys get hurt. They need goalies. Yada yada yada. Mm-hmm. The guy I'm most interested in, honestly, is the guy we got from Ottawa.
We'll go division by division.
Yeah.
To get through those, but yeah.
Yeah, so let's start in the Atlantic Division.
First, before we do that, so Vladimir Tarasenko, $9.5 million this year, $5.5 million next year.
That's
not even
that bad.
It's not that bad, but also the fact that you could take him and then move him for good value is what makes it hard for me.
How old is he?
29.
That's getting up there in hockey, though.
Yeah. It is, but it's a 2-year deal with not a lot.
Yeah, but who are you going to trade him to?
There are many teams that want him. There are many teams that told the Kraken, like, hey, if you take him, we'll give you something.
I don't know. Maybe it was a situation where they just looked at it and they went. But, like, at the same time, he's definitively the best player on the Blues for them to take.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
That's part of it.
I definitely think that's the one move that I was like, why would you not take him?
Yeah.
But I don't know.
So for the Atlantic Division, of course, we started with Dredger. Jeremy Lauzon's an interest. So this division, you see the young talent, right? You see the young flow, but then you see Yanni Gourde.
Oh, my God. Can we just talk about the fact that the Tampa Bay Lightning is so goddamn stacked that they had to put Yanni up for auction?
Yeah, they had to put him in the draft.
They had to put him. They couldn't protect. Like, I literally said to you, I was like, if we can't get Stamkos, I'll take Yanni. Like, but at the same time,
Stamkos is old and injured at this point.
I'd rather have Yanni Gourde. Like, 29, like, center. That's pretty good. He's a leader. He's come off of 2 Stanley Cup wins. I mean, at the same time, imagine being him and being like, yes, I win Stanley Cup. Oh, wait, I moved to Seattle.
Where we don't really know what this team is going to be.
That must be such a bummer. At the same time, be like, man, whatever.
Yanni's going to be a cornerstone piece for the next few years.
Some really interesting pickups, some really like guys who would be in the like Dredger. To be honest, I watched some of his play last year. He wasn't the starter per se, but he actually had a better save percentage in the regular season than Price did.
Yeah, 9.27 save percentage is pretty good for what is presumably our starting goaltender. That's pretty solid. Even at 23 starts.
I would say the one thing that was most noticeable about this draft is it was a lot about creating a cornerstone of solid defense for the future.
Right. Defensemen were such a big part of this.
I love, because the way that the way this team was drafted was for the future, not for the now. And
we weren't certain that was going to be the case. Our main discussions that we've had about this expansion draft, and what we were most keen on was, okay, are they going to focus on veteran talent, or are they just going to focus on getting younger and building some type of culture right away?
Like, are they going to focus on being flashy and winning now and getting like everybody hyped? But I think by doing this, it's going to allow for a future where you can have longer term success, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on Jared Mccann as a Maple Leafs fan?
He's a player that he's 25. He didn't have a huge role on the Leafs. Obviously, he had 14 goals, 18 assists. He was a center, so he didn't have a lot of time because he was behind some of the more established players.
Mm-hmm.
But I dig it. I mean, he was a good player for the Leafs, and I'm excited. He'll be a good guy for our staff.
It is interesting to see especially the center position, because it's something they mentioned on the broadcast. This is only one of the good comments made on the broadcast, in all fairness. But I mean, the center position, as we saw when we did our fantasy hockey draft, has always been stacked.
Yeah.
And so with that, you're not going to have like A-level centers as you would goalkeepers in this kind of draft. So getting guys that haven't really gotten their opportunity and then giving them the shot here. But that's really the case for a lot of these guys, especially this young core that we're talking about.
But it's interesting if you really look at a lot of the defensemen we pulled, especially out of the Atlantic. These guys are like 22, 23, 24, with long contracts left, like a lot of team accessibility left on their contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, the thing that people forget about the expansion draft is players brought in cannot be cut for 5 years.
Interesting. That's an interesting point.
You cannot cut them for 5 years.
So they're part of your core.
They are part of your core, which is one of the things I thought about just now, and I was like, that's really smart, because you're bringing in young defensemen who you can train up, bring them in, make them part of your core. These are guys who have not been touched by other teams' philosophies, really. And you can be like, all right, let's create a solid squad.
Mm-hmm. And there were guys too, because this is the negotiation window for them, the 21st to the 28th. Yeah. There are guys who obviously came in here as quote unquote free agents,
right,
who are willing to sign those 5-year deals. And the GM Ron Francis, the head coach, were very adamant of like, that commitment is really important to us, that these guys are willing to come in for 5 years.
And that's the thing. That's the other thing you bring up. The free agency is by not you spending all that money on a guy like Carey Price, we're still well below the cap. Like a lot of these players had a very low. We're picking up very small amounts of salary from these guys, which means going into the free agency market, which we technically get first dibs on players.
Which a part of the draft is like some of the guys that were free agents, quote unquote, and were eligible in this draft on this team, and they're on this team. They're also drafted.
Right, but now there's also the other aspect of the free agent. Like there were players who were going into free agency, like as unrestricted, and now there'll be players in like actual free agency in who we can talk to, and by leaving open huge amounts of salary cap space, I like it's smart. They built their defense in the draft, and now they can go and add in some pieces on offense.
They need forwards.
Yeah, they really need some forwards. And I think but that's the thing. There'll be lots of forwards to be able to grab, and I'm sure there's a lot of players in the draft in the free agency who are like, I would like a new start somewhere else. I'd like to go and not sit behind a big name, because there's plenty of forwards on teams like, I don't know, Pittsburgh or like
even Toronto, Washington,
there's
whatever.
There's plenty of players in Toronto that could easily be like, hey, goodbye. I'd like to go in Montreal, Toronto, Boston, Pittsburgh. There's teams all over the place that would probably be like, hey, yeah, we got third, second linemen who could easily be first linemen.
Mm-hmm. For the Metropolitan Division, I think the easiest and most flashiest name here, other than Brannan, who we'll get to, is Jordan Eberle. That was a surprise to me, not only that he was unprotected, but the fact they were willing to grab him, considering the philosophy that we originally talked about. The Metropolitan Division doesn't show that as much, but Eberle's not in a tremendously bad contract either, from what I remember.
Does that surprise you, though? That because as much as it surprised me when I realized who exactly Jordan, because I was like, for a second, I was like, Jordan Eberle.
He was amazing in the playoff run.
And then I looked at it. I went back and I looked at some of his video, and I was like, I literally spent this whole season watching him just tear it up. And
yeah,
he, like, I know he's 31, but like,
you got to get some vets on this team.
He's a key name for the Islanders. Same with Colin Blackwell for the Rangers, like,
and Brannan for the Penguins.
Yeah, there are some weird names being like let walk, basically.
Right, and we talked about this when we heard the names. Like, there were a lot of guys that were unprotected.
Yeah,
that surprised us. So Jordan Eberle's contract, $7 million this year, 4.75 next year, 3.75 the year after that. So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
In terms of a contract for a guy who's going to be running in that forward line, that first line, and that right wing position. Especially as we continue to get forwards, the left and right wings are going to be important. He's going to have a great chance to build chemistry, especially with guys like Tanev next to him as well.
I think what I'm noticing is I think our team's going to have really good. I think we're going to have a really good first wing. We're going to have a pretty good third wing. We need to get guys to fill in that second wing.
Right. And not only that, I think, getting these guys who are pretty established top six is really good too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's so important for an expansion team, and they're definitely getting it. Speaking of Brandon Tanev as well, Tanev, they made a joke about his photo during the broadcast.
Yeah, he looks very surprised.
I was like, why? Like, that was maybe the weirdest interview of the night with Fowler. And we'll talk about some of the weirdness in the broadcast, but that was something to mention as well. Vanek here for the Capitals is a great young goaltender as well. They went young with the goaltenders, which was great. For the Central, not too much to discuss here.
I mean, Jamie Oleksiak is a pretty good defender. I don't know, like Mason Appleton, he did some good stuff.
I mean, there are guys who are much older in this sector of the division, which, I mean, that's indicative of the entire division, right?
There are guys. If I was going to say anything, I'd say this division felt the most trade baity to me.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It felt the most like packagey, like get a bunch of guys, package them, send them to a team. Like who is at a point who is at a point where they need like a player or two to push themselves to the, like, who needs like to reference the NBA, who need like a team that needs like a Middleton type player,
right,
to like get going.
Definitely, I think it's the most trade baity just because it's also the oldest
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
out of the picks that they made.
Except for Mason Appleton. I would say Mason Appleton's the one player because I remember I saw some of he did a pretty he was a key component of Winnipeg this year with the slight run that they made.
Yeah.
I think 25, 12 goals, 13 assists.
You have a building piece there, especially at a
Yeah.
center position where, again, we talked
He
about the fact that you get some of these older guys at the center position where didn't get as much run. Appleton's not necessarily that case, but he's definitely going to get more run than he had at Winnipeg.
I think he'll be he's like the second line
center
type guy that I talked about. Like,
yeah, I would agree with that, at least for where we're at right now. So the Pacific Division's interesting. And obviously this is the rivals division, which again they kind of overhyped on the broadcast.
Yeah.
But Mark Giordano, he's making 1 year about 9 million, 9.5 mil. So this was kind of expected, but again, that one veteran presence and a guy who still is very good defensively at his age, not even at his age, he's still pretty much top tier in the NHL.
Here's what I see happening with Giordano. One, he's 37, but I watched him last year and he was still, as a defender, he was still playing
he's
real
still
well.
top of the league right now.
Two, you need a guy like Giordano as he will be your captain.
No question.
And three, I'm pretty certain they not only drafted him to be your captain, but drafted him with the belief that in 3 years pushing it, when he retires, they'll go. And I'm pretty certain if you talk to him off the record and asked him, he would probably tell you yes. I would not be shocked if part of them drafting him, they said to him, hey, how would you like to be an assistant coach?
I think Calgary also wants him to be an assistant coach too.
I think Mark Giordano would probably be like, you know what, Calgary, I'm gonna stay here because I think Toronto's gonna be like, Seattle's gonna be like, we can give you a lot more money. And frankly, especially if you think about it, going from being a player to an assistant coach, why would you would totally want to go coach the players you played for? You already know, you got camaraderie. But anyway, right. You just look at this guy. He has 17 assists. That right there is the major aspect for me. A defenseman that got 17 assists.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's crazy.
What I loved about, and we knew this was going to happen. I think everything's sort of lined up. The contract's a 1 year deal. I think Calgary was actually willing to let him go just to get a little bit younger. They know that he's going up there in age. It's good because of the contract, and he's still a top defenseman, and he's going to continue to be a top defenseman next year.
Yeah.
It just works best, I think, for everyone, even for Calgary letting him go as well.
And you know he'll be a player that when they go to Calgary, they'll all do a standing ovation for him. Be like, yay, Giordano.
Yeah. I mean, he's a legend over there, but I think it was definitely the right place and the right time for all parties involved, I think.
Yeah.
Adam Larson's a good pickup too, another sort of older defenseman. Adam True, again, younger sort of center. He's like one of those young centers. Colkin, I can't talk too much about, but I mean, the main thing with a guy like Colkin is that same sort of idea, right? And even when we look at some of these guys, a lot of these guys, there's a few guys here, especially when we're talking about the Atlantic Division, who we got some guys like Kyle Furry who played in the AHL last year.
Right.
I mean, that's sort of the same thing I think with Colkin a little bit, where it's like, oh yeah, we got a guy who hasn't really played a lot, but we can work to develop and we can continue a guy's development. And that's really what Colkin gives them.
Well, it's also interesting because I was looking through a lot of these guys,
I should say.
A lot of these players have connections to Seattle or Washington in some way.
Mm-hmm. How important is that to you? I think the main reason for that is the fan base, but building that pipeline there already, because it is more of a hockey town than I think people realize.
Right. Myself as a hockey fan, I already know that like hockey is a sport where it's like, yeah, it's cool when you have a player who has a connection to the city that you're going to. I don't really care how much they're like if they have a connection, but I think in a way if you're thinking from a sports development perspective and a team perspective and a front house perspective, and you're able to go, hey, let's have I don't know, AHL night or a Tri-Cities night where you can be like, hey, this player, this player, this player, this player, and this player, all of the starting lineup, all have connections to the Tri-City Capitals or whatever they're called.
Right.
I think there is an aspect there. Also, the fact that Ron Francis does have a connection to the Tri-Cities. So
that was pretty clear in the way he was drafting tonight as well. Before we move on to some Olympic stuff, as we're getting to the opening ceremonies in 2 days, let's talk about this broadcast that ESPN did for this, because I didn't really like it at all.
This was a weird broadcast.
What are your overall thoughts on the broadcast? Because this is the first keep in mind, this is a monumental broadcast. This is the first broadcast ESPN had of any like hockey content in this contract, and it was not a great showing from a broadcasting perspective.
It definitely showed. Like, for one, you have
Chris Fowler, who's
a football guy.
Right.
And he's also been a type of guy that you talk about him making fun of all these teams and stuff, but that doesn't surprise me because that's what he does when he calls football. He's always finding things to poke and prod and make fun of, and
Yeah, but also sorry to cut you off there, but what kind of, I don't know if I mean, like, well, obviously we're doing this off the cuff as our own sort of hockey fans at different levels. Obviously you more than I, and we're willing to acknowledge that, we don't really cover hockey as much on the show as we probably should, but we're willing to acknowledge that and say that, we love the game and that's why we're talking about it. But the thing that I didn't like, other than the guy he was with, who is a resident hockey guy, he is a pretty good tried and true analyst, I would say. The one thing that I didn't like about the broadcast was like, oh, they had a bunch of, like, it was clear that like Fowler was reading off note cards that they just gave him.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not, like, obviously you have cards and stuff, but you're not going to be looking at a card the whole time. And it's like, you got to have some tried and true hockey guys. And part of that might be like, oh, they're at Gasworks Park. They're like, it's more localized, I guess, obviously, like local interest, I guess, because that was kind of the point, was they were trying to be maybe a little bit too local, I guess, in the broadcast, if you think about it. But like the fact that they're using cards and it felt just very like scripted, and just like, it just kind of felt like an exhausting watch after a while, just for those reasons, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of made me, like, we talked about this beforehand, but like, I wish they had the guy that they get for Sports Center during the season to come on and talk about it. I don't know why they picked Fowler. Maybe they didn't have anybody else, but
I mean, the main reason why, so this is the same thing like with the Stephen A stuff with the UFC, like big UFC events. The first one, they put Stephen A on, and Fowler is the same way too. Obviously, he doesn't necessarily have the gravitational pull of a guy like Stephen A at ESPN, but the main reason is that, like, yeah, we're going to have you do this hockey thing because random people, when they scroll through the channels and see ESPN2 and randomly click on it, they're like, oh, this is Fowler, I like him, I'm going to watch it. And then they're hoping to kind of get new hockey fans. But that's kind of part of what I don't like about the UFC coverage for ESPN and now the NHL coverage is it feels at times that when they get these new sports and like the main reason why the NHL, more particularly the UFC, were very adamant about going to ESPN was because like ESPN is going to help us build our brand, right?
Right.
But the problem that I have from broadcasting perspective is it's like, yeah, for sure it does. The branding does, but it's not necessarily the personalities that do. It's the fact that you're on ESPN, right? You're going to be on ABC for the Stanley Cup Finals. Like that's really what's going to get people into it, right? But you can't force guys that don't know the game or the sport to do that, because it's not about the faces of ESPN doing these broadcasts. It's about having the people that know hockey talk about hockey, and then people are going to get interested in it because like, oh, here's the Stanley Cup Finals on NBC, or here's this game on ESPN in like the middle of the day, right?
Right, and I'm sure like when it comes to the actual like season and like NHL on ESPN, when you end up with like, I don't know,
I forgot who's going to be there, but we'll see.
Probably 3 games a week. I don't think they're going to take a guy who does college football and be like, hey, now you get to go talk about hockey. I doubt it. Especially when they already have guys on their lineup that know what they're talking about with hockey. It felt very thrown together. Like the stage was cool and the setting was cool. I liked the backdrop. I liked all that stuff. I liked how they had a couple of the players there. Fowler was a weird choice.
And I didn't. One of the things, and I don't know if you feel this way as like a Seattleite, and I'm certain this is the case in other cities as well, but living in Seattle, one of the things that annoys me about sports broadcasts in Seattle is they're always like showing these like iconic things all the time. Like obviously we love them. Like we love Pike Place Market. We love the Space Needle. We love the Seattle Aquarium, but there's like, it's not like the entire picture of the city, right? And even like Gasworks Park is more like known locally than nationally, right? But it's like basically they like showcase these national things that make people think Seattle. The only thing they didn't show was the rain,
Yeah.
And like for me, I don't know. I just don't really love that. I get why they're doing it, but like that for me as someone who lives here locally, I just don't really like, because it doesn't really show. Like I think Gasworks Park was cool in that, like, yeah, like that's actually like a tried and true place that people who live here in Seattle in the area know about. But like those big places like the Space Needle, like they're awesome and we love that. But like to just constantly showcase that stuff on these broadcasts is just a little bit much for me. And I'm sure that's not the case just for Seattle, but I think that's the case for other cities like Philly with the Bell and all that stuff.
I do have to say, as a hockey fan, this is really fun to see that it's already started. Looking at the Kraken Seattle Kraken fan page, there's a post from 2 hours ago that said, "What do you think? What do we think so far, Kraken fans? Help a brother out. I'm still new to hockey, so most of these names don't mean much to me." And then the first comment is, "You take Gio who is 105 years old, but not Price. Makes sense. No Tarasenko? Question mark? Question mark. Okay. Gordon Van are ballers. That's it." The next comment, the reply to that is, "Price is too expensive. Gio will help set the standards and lead by example. Right. He'll be the glue." But like for me, it's the fact that we have our very first like bad hockey take, which is just quintessential hockey fan, like people immediately, quintessential fan of sports in general, being like, "Oh, you don't do this. I know everything about sports." It's like, oh my goodness. Right. But it's fun to see stuff like that already.
Yeah.
Going back to what you said about like, that's just kind of ESPN's go-to thing, is to like show like all the different spots around the city. It's like, oh look, I was kind of shocked that they didn't just use their like stock footage they have from like nighttime Seattle for like a Seahawks game, or like, and honestly, I was shocked that the thing about Fowler that I was most shocked about is that I was shocked that ESPN even let him come to this city to do something in Seattle, considering he's known for the notorious cupcake debacle.
What is this
of
cupcake debacle thing? I've
not
heard about it in passing. I don't remember it.
he was on the, I believe he was on the, it was either him or Herb Street, but they were on a call. It was back in 2016 when Huskies were on their run to the playoffs, and they called I think it was like a
Production meeting?
no, it was ESPN. It was a Pac-12 After Dark on ESPN, and like during the game, he basically said that like the Huskies that season had a cupcake schedule.
A lot of people said that, not just him.
But here's the difference. Other people are not professional analysts.
I mean, did other analysts at ESPN say that? I don't think it was just him.
No, they're not out here saying like it's cupcakes and therefore. But here's the problem: by saying it was a cupcake schedule, he not only did he say it was a cupcake schedule and therefore they should not, like, their wins shouldn't really mean anything. The thing is, that's not okay for an analyst to be saying like that, and then basically being saying, but it's okay for I don't know, Alabama, who has cupcakes for days. They should be fat as hell because they have so many cupcakes.
They have a lot of.
I don't like Herb Street or Fowler because I think they have a thing for the ACC and the SEC, and everybody else to them can just.
I mean, we'll talk about this more, but isn't like Texas and Oklahoma wanting to go into the SEC?
Yep, and there's no way in hell they're going to get in because why would Texas and Oklahoma want to go into the SEC? They're just going to get beat up and thrown in a pile. Like, that's the thing.
It's Texas like the A&M thing. It's the A&M thing.
Yeah, like Texas and Oklahoma are nowhere close enough to good enough to compete.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we're gonna get into this more on Friday, but like the thing for me, it's like this is not, and I've bought into this too because this is not like just an ESPN thing. It's like all the networks. This is like Pac-12 not promoting themselves as well, I guess, but it's also like the reality of it is that's just kind of what college football is. Like overall, it's like tried and true, like SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, like Pac-12 just always kind of been on the back burner. And that's why like Pac-12 After Dark is what it is. Like that's just kind of part of it, unfortunately.
It's also the problem that the Pac-12 has is well, for one, we're stuck over here on Pacific time, which means all our good games happen after dark. So anybody who actually wants to stay up and watch the Pac-12 has to be up till midnight, 1 a.m, 2 a.m. sometimes.
And coaches don't like that, the Stanford head coach was like, "This thing is kind of ridiculous.
It's pretty
that we play at noon and then we play at 7.
It's pretty bold that like all of our games get scheduled for like 4, 5, 6, 7 or noon. Like, whereas all the other teams get to play their games at like 1 or 2.
Like it's 9, noon, or 1 or 2.
Yeah. So I don't know. Apparently, like I read an article today that said if Texas and Oklahoma do manage to make it into the SEC, like apparently the Pac-12 might try and get like Texas Tech, which makes very little sense to me because
geographically it doesn't make any sense.
It's like we're the Pac-12. Why would you want to get someone from the Texas? Like, okay.
Sure. By the way, Texas Tech is probably going to win the Pac-12 title.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Why I don't think anybody from the Pac-12 is going to be like, yeah, let's bring a team that's just going to demolish every year.
Yeah. I think the ultimate thing with this is just like it is like this whole East Coast bias thing that's just sort of like a huge part of kind of every sport in general. But the networks are a part of it. Let's just put it that way. And I don't think it's just ESPN. I think it's everyone else as well. It's just kind of how it is, unfortunately. Let's get to the Olympics a little bit. I did want to talk about the debacle that happened this morning. We are recording this at 9 p.m. Pacific time on Wednesday. So Sweden played the U.S. this morning, the U.S. women, and I talked to you, Brandon, yesterday about Sweden is the team that I just don't like watching the U.S. women play. And we had that. We lost in the quarterfinal in Rio, in a penalty shootout that was really tough against Sweden. Sweden's has always been like one of our main rivals, other than Japan, Canada, I would say Germany as well. But today, to lose this morning 3-0 to Sweden after being unbeaten for 44 straight games, literally 40 of those were wins, 4 were draws, for the U.S. women's national team to play as lethargic as they played. And Caitlin Murray of ESPN.com wrote a great piece about the U.S. women's national team look lost and confused as Sweden end their unbeaten run. That was a perfect way to sort of sum it up. Rose Lavelle, the ball on her feet most of the time in left flank. There was no buildup in the midfield. It was just horrible. I think that is the worst game I've ever seen the U.S. women's national team play. Ever. I don't think I've ever seen them play worse than that. It was terrible. It was literally a pain to watch for the 80 minutes that I watched it. So it's going to be rough. I don't think they have a super tough group coming up, if I'm not mistaken, but to lose to Sweden's not a good start. So let's just say I'm not in great spirits after that. The U.S. women's softball team, though, picked up a win today against Canada, won both of their games over the last 2 days in, of course, the early action. So, Brandon, what have your thoughts been on the Olympics so far before we get to the opening ceremony on Friday?
I mean, is it going to happen on Friday?
I think that's a fair question. I think it's a fair question.
Because I think Friday's their last chance to call it off. Once the opening ceremonies happen,
they're going to have to go the whole way.
It's on. And frankly, I think if they call it off, that's bullshit. Because,
2 sports already started.
2 sports have started. We live in a world with COVID. Wow. Who would have thought? But guess what? People are getting vaccinated. People are going to get sick. I don't know. I'm at a point where I'm like, fucking deal with it. I'm sorry. But, you know me. I was so pro dealing with it early on. Yeah, we dealt with it. We did what we had to do. We're getting vaccinated. And frankly, I'm done with the people who refuse to get vaccinated creating a world where
we got new variants and stuff like that.
But still,
but that's because people aren't getting vaccinated,
right? But there's also very, 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 very little proof that what the vaccines we have, the vaccinated people will get the Delta variant. The vaccines, I don't know. My thing is this, I don't know.
Here's my
frustrated. I'm just frustrated because it's we're at a point where it's just
let's put this back, because when we're talking about the Olympics and COVID and everything, of course, being delayed a year, having vaccines available, all that stuff. When we're talking about the Olympics and whether, and I'm of the proponent still where I don't feel like they should play. And the reason why is because it's not on the players. It's not if this gets canceled, it's not even on Tokyo. It's on the IOC, really.
No, it's not. It's not on the IOC. It's on Tokyo because they couldn't get their stupid country to get vaccinated in time.
Well, yes, but also there's availability issues, things like that. But I put it on the IOC partially because you have to look at their track record, right?
What are they supposed to do? Robert? Just keep canceling it, keep pushing it back?
Well, no, I think I feel like they're going to cancel it and they're going to be done, and just say, okay, let's focus on winter.
You want it? Well, but here's the thing. I don't think it's fair to just cancel it, because think about all these people
that are already there.
That have already worked hard to get there, that who knows if they'll get there again. Think about Simone Biles, who
this is her last Olympics.
We don't know that. We don't know that.
She
hasn't said whether or not, but this is probably her last chance. Yes, she's won a lot. Yes, she's been amazing. But like, she should get to go out on the stage, whether she sucks or she does amazing.
She's gonna win gold. We know that,
right?
Like, she's
which
gonna
is why
win.
she should. I don't think she cares or gives much of a crap if there's a single person in that stadium. She's gonna go out there. She's gonna kick ass. She's gonna win. And like, that's the thing. These athletes are people. At the end of the day, they've worked hard. They've already had it pushed back 1 year, which for an athlete is mentally just insane. Like,
to know that you have, I mean, it's a positive for a lot of these athletes just because you got that extra year.
Right. And
I think that that's actually more of a positive than a negative for some athletes, not everyone.
Here's the thing. I think for this to go ahead I think if it doesn't go ahead, it's going to set a bad precedent, because if it goes ahead, it's going to show the world, look, this is what this is what it is now. If you like, we're going to keep going.
If we keep going, if we're just going to do this,
you just keep going, because we're going to keep having events. We're going to keep doing things, because at this point, Robert, like, people will get vaccinated, and
people are already vaccinated at these games.
That's my thing. People are already vaccinated. Some people won't get vaccinated in the world, and that's the thing. We just got to live with it. You go on. Some people will get COVID. Some people won't. But the fact is, if you're vaccinated and you go to the Olympics and you get sick, you get COVID,
you're also less likely to not get
your odds of that, but also you're not really a spreader. You're like, your chance of spreading it to someone
are pretty low too. I believe
very
that's
low.
True. I believe
that is what scientists have said. It's very low. So I think if this was in any other country, if any other country was hosting this right now, other than, I don't know, China or Brazil or something like that,
South America,
anywhere other than South America or like Japan or China,
if it was Europe, if it was even the US,
it would be fine. No one would care. And that's an interesting question. 2 years from now, Winter Olympics is supposed to be in Beijing.
Next year, not 2 years.
Oh, that's right, next year, because we skipped a year for the Olympics.
February 2022.
Jeez. I don't know if people are even going to go to that, because that's a whole different thing, because I think I think that's going to be a straight up boycott.
At least I know for hockey, there's a bit of a discussion there. I know for the U.S., there's a bit of a discussion.
I've heard that the U.S. is just straight up maybe going to boycott.
Yeah, that's a governmental thing right now.
But I don't know. I personally am of the opinion that it's like, I think they should let it go ahead, run the course. I mean, I don't know.
For me right now, and
the last thing I'll say, Robert, and then you can go ahead, is I know I'm probably, like, anybody who watches this is probably gonna be like, his opinion sucks, but it's like, yeah, well, we've dealt with, look, here's the thing. We've gone through all this shit already. Like, we've dealt with this shit. Now we get to have something good for once.
The reason why I put this on the IOC is because if anyone's going to do this wrong, it's going to be the IOC.
Yeah, probably.
And I'm not, and like, that's the fundament. This is okay. So we had, so think of just this summer alone, and we've had international events, right? We've had, tennis is a different story because they've been going on for a while. Let's look at the European Championships and Copa America. Copa America was definitely rocky. And I mean, they did it in Brazil, which wasn't a great idea. It wasn't perfect, but Euro went pretty well. Euro went, other than Spain, Euro went well. The European Championships went well, pretty much without a hitch, other than Spain. I think that's probably a good thing ultimately. But when you're talking about the Olympics, this is a whole different ball game than the European Championships, than Copa America. It's a different ball game because we watch soccer today. We've been watching soccer over the last few days, but the Olympics is a bunch of these sports. It's swimming, it's basketball, it's archery, it's badminton. It's like a bunch of sports. It's like hundreds of sports, hundreds of athletes, different countries with different, like, these are people from different countries with the different regulations.
Right.
There's all this stuff going in. Keep in mind, going into a place that is already in a massive state of emergency because of COVID.
That very easily could have been not, but
Right. But that's the fact of the situation. And when you're looking at all of that combined, and don't get me wrong, the regulations, I've looked through them for the IOC, for the athletes, for the broadcasters, in terms of keeping people safe. They're good. They're pretty standard. They're pretty much they're basically like NBA bubble kind of stuff. They're pretty basic. They're pretty standard. And I think the biggest worry is, will athletes actually follow those rules? Hopefully, I imagine a good portion will, but there will be some that won't and will get kicked off. We know that's going to be the case.
I gotta say, my favorite rule is the anti-sex beds, which
they're not giving out condoms this year.
No, they are giving out condoms.
Wait, are they or no?
Yeah, they're giving out condoms, but they're claiming they're giving them out not for them to use at the Olympics, but to take home with them and use as like examples of like safe sex.
Interesting, because they actually do give out condoms.
Oh, I know. Yeah, because it's basically the war. Think about it. It makes a lot of sense considering it's like the world's best athletes, and like, what else are they gonna do?
I mean, I don't know. Also, I think isn't the U.S. women's national team for basketball staying in a hotel?
Gymnastics.
Oh, it's the gymnastics team.
They basically were like, screw this.
Which I respect, honestly. Because the basketball team for both the men's and women's in Rio, because of the Zika virus concern, stayed on a boat. So it's not necessarily uncommon. But I don't know. And plus, like, the Olympic Village thing is just going to be a mess. I don't know. If this does go awry, which with all those facts in hand and the IOC track record, I hate to be pessimistic, but I feel like the track record shows that this is not going to end well. And I might be wrong. Like, I thought Copa wasn't going to end well. It actually ended pretty well. I might be wrong, but I don't know. What scares me the most is not these first few days, right? Not this weekend. That's not what scares me the most. What scares me the most is like 2 weeks from now. Like 2 weeks from now. Like, I'm not worried about this weekend. I'm not worried about next week. I'm worried about the week after. Like, we get to Friday of like the first week of August or something. We get to that week. Are we in a spot where we're comfortable with the Olympics? And keep in mind too, and we can talk about this as well with the just economics as a whole of the Olympics. Brisbane got the 2032 Olympic Games with no other bids.
I thought the U.S. was in the...
No, it was just Brisbane.
That's weird.
And
I mean,
obviously this is bigger, but
yeah. I mean, it does kind of screw up. It puts a huge hit to whatever country takes them.
I think there are only a few countries in the world. Like even Beijing in '08 was a mess. Even the World Cup in Rio was a mess. But like there are only a few countries in the world that could feasibly do the Olympics the right way. Right. I think London 2012 is a good example. I think, the Olympics are going to have in LA in 2020, I believe 8 is it. All those facilities are already built or going to be built and are used for different things other than just the Olympics. Vancouver, obviously, a lot of that stuff is still being used. I think that the countries themselves, and I think the next 20 years of the Olympic Games are either going to change or they might not even happen anymore. Like I'm scared for what's going to happen after Brisbane, because if only a few countries are going to bid, I think countries are realizing that economically and safety wise, not just because of COVID, but I think the next 10 years when we get to Brisbane, there's going to be a different vibe about where the Olympics are at and where they're headed. But I mean, like, I don't know.
I mean, I would not be surprised if this is what I've been thinking about with the Olympics. Why doesn't the IOC create their own Olympic compound?
Like their own area.
Just buy an area, build a pimpin' place for the athletes to live when they're there. Just make a state-of-the-art swimming pool, track, all this stuff. You can have a little town. You can have it, I don't know, make it close to Las Vegas. I don't know, make it close to Paris. Make it somewhere, I don't know. But make it so it doesn't have to be the responsibility of the city to
make all these venues.
Make all these venues and then do nothing with them.
I think where we're headed with the Olympics, in all honesty, in the next 10, once Brisbane is done, where we're headed probably after Brisbane is one city is just going to take care of it. There's going to be one city that does winter, one city that does summer, and that's it.
I could see, what I've always wondered about is why Mexico, Canada, America didn't put in a slot as a group.
I mean, they did that for the World Cup.
Right, exactly. They're getting it for the World Cup. Why don't they do it for the Olympics? Because you can spread it out around. You can go, you could have I guess one of the problems with that would be it would be all over the place and you'd have to have
yeah.
I don't know.
You would have certain sports in different areas, right? And that's the thing. We know this to be true even with Sochi in 2014, even these Olympics this year. It's not just in Tokyo, right? It's kind of around Japan, basically.
Yeah.
In certain areas. That's always been part of it. I don't know if they've ever done dual bids before or united bids, I guess. I don't know if they've ever done that, but it's definitely something to keep in mind for the future for sure.
Yeah.
I just think ultimately what the bid for Brisbane shows, for me at least, why it was only them, simply what it shows is that the interest isn't there for it anymore from the countries. It's not there anymore, and they're going to have to rectify that somehow. And I don't know if there's a way to.
Because, the events are still popular, and, the Olympics as a thing, I think will stay around. It just depends how.
Right. And so much of this, and FIFA's a culprit of this as well. So much of this for me is why is it that the cities have to foot so much of the bill when the IOC is making billions of dollars over the next month? That's the thing for me. It's it used to be this thing where the cities were honored to get the Olympics, and Brisbane, to their credit, is like, oh yeah, this is actually going to do a lot of good for our economy because we already are planning on building these facilities that we know we're going to use, right? We already have these facilities that we're already using. Like, to their credit, like there are countries like the US, like Canada, like the UK, like Australia, to their credit, who are going to use the Olympics as a way to boost their local economy and the country's economy. But like most countries, when they got the Olympics, like they didn't really do that. Well, that was the case, and they said, oh, it would do this. It actually worsened a lot more economies. And I think that ultimately is what's discouraging people or discouraging countries and local governments, and also national security concerns and all this stuff. So all of that together tells me that in the next 20 years, or in the next 12 to 13, maybe 14 years after Brisbane, this entire thing is going to change. And it's on the IOC, I think, to either foot the bill for it, which they have the capacity to do.
Right.
And they should have done years ago. It's either going to be them footing the bill in some capacity, like you said, building their own like little village somehow with the city's partnership, or them paying countries funds to do it. And I think if that were the case, the protests that are always surrounding the Olympic Games and people not wanting it in their cities, that would not happen if the IOC was more willing to foot the bill more, especially when they have the money to do so.
Yeah.
So any final thoughts on that? I know I kind of gave a pretty long overview of my thoughts on that.
No, I think that's about it.
And then finally, we did want to talk about Logan Paul and Anderson Silva. They're apparently going to do a boxing match, I think, in a couple of months here. Nothing's official yet. I'm pretty much done with the celebrity boxing kink.
Yeah.
You know, like Alvarez and Caleb Plant are going to fight here in the next couple months. We know we're going to get Fury Wilder. I think that's in October now, something like that. Like, that's the fights that I care about. And my whole thing with Logan, and we've talked about this, is he's not really a boxer. Like, he'd be much more fit to be a wrestler. And I'm not saying that these celebrity boxers are not good boxers. Like, Logan and Jake are good boxers. Like, they clearly care about it, but it's just not a good product. And it hurts the sport ultimately, because what happened was promoters basically ruined the sport by like being like, oh, we're gonna have a bunch of these belts, a bunch of these weight classes, weight divisions, and we're not gonna give the people what they want, right? We're not like, they didn't give Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao. They did it like 10 years later than they should have, right? That's a perfect example. Like, because of that and bad refereeing, bad judging, the celebrity boxers were like, yeah, you know what? We'll put on a show. And it hurts the sport ultimately, because people who watch those fights, like the Logan Paul fights, are going to think that that's boxing, and it really isn't. And the guys that are actually really good at boxing, or like, not saying they're not good, they are, but the guys that do it professionally, right? Like a Canelo Alvarez, like a Caleb Plant, like a Fury, like a Wilder, like, that's the class of the sport. That's what makes the sport great. That's what makes it the sweet science and not the grabbing science, if you will.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where I'm at with it. And it makes me really frustrated.
That's the thing. Like, I'll be the first one to tell you that I'm not a huge boxing fan. But, like, when I see good boxing, I appreciate it. When I watch celebrity boxing like Logan Paul, it's not boxing. He doesn't box.
He grabs.
He just grabs. Like, he uses his length to grab, which is like, okay, that's fine. But like, I don't watch boxing to see people clinch. Mm-hmm. I watch boxing to see people punch each other.
Yeah.
Like, Like, so I don't know. I have no interest in Logan Paul versus whoever.
Yeah. I think I've lost interest in it. Like Logan Paul Floyd Mayweather was fun, but it wasn't, it wasn't, it wasn't like
And
a
like
boxing match. Like it
and
just
like honestly, I think KSI, you look at the fact that he hasn't fought since
Logan Paul too.
yeah, he hasn't fought since Logan Paul too. There's probably a reason. Like,
He didn't
yeah,
even want to do boxing in the first place. He
yeah,
just did it because Weller wanted him to.
yeah, he stays in shape and he's good at it, but like the only reason he fought Logan Paul is because he had beef with him and he knew he could beat him.
Yeah.
And he's done it, he's proved it, he's ended it. Like, it's obvious that beef is over if you watch his podcast.
Right. You fight it out and then you're done. That's kind of what he said about Joe Weller too.
Right. Like, I'm like, they were like, it's interesting because like Logan Paul and KSI, they respect each other and it shows that they respect each other. But like between KSI and Logan Paul, I always felt like KSI was the one who would have actually ended up becoming like a boxer, making big money off of it.
Because he's a more natural boxer.
He's the one who actually trains to box rather than clinch.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. And I also have a hard time with the fact that like leading up to that Mayweather fight, like all these networks like Fox, ESPN, and even we to some extent did give it a little coverage, not a lot. But like the fact that was the biggest event in boxing, I don't know. I'm not, again, I think there's a reason why we're more UFC guys than boxing guys. There's a reason why the UFC is just a better product, or MMA in general. Let's not just use the UFC as an organization. MMA in general is just a better product because you get the fights that you want when you want them. And yeah, there's more promotions than MMA, but Bellator is great. One is great. Like they're great promotions. And like, yeah, Top Rank and PBC are fun, but like if I want to see an actual title fight, like are we gonna get it? Like, are we gonna get the title fight that we want? Like, probably not. So it's like, is there a reason why you're more of a UFC guy than a boxing guy? Is it kind of all those reasons I laid out, or is it something kind of different for you?
well, I'm more of a UFC guy because it's multiple different types of fighting.
Yeah, multiple facets.
It's not just boxing. It's like all the different. It's ultimate fighting. It's also the fact that it's closest to. It's sort of. It has aspects of like professional wrestling in the way it's presented.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I never got into boxing, but for some reason I watched UFC once and I was like, the violence is intriguing.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the way they fight, and the way it's like the combination of the way they fight, the way they like talk crap to each other. Like, I miss the old days of the UFC. Like, I miss the 2010s to 2015, 2016, 2017, where you literally had press conferences where guys were like standing up and yelling at each other and being like to the point where they were like, if there was not a table and Dana White between them, they would jump each other.
Yeah, like Connor and Diaz back in the day and all that stuff.
Yeah, like throwing water bottles and
yeah. This also gets me back. You bring up a good point too before we finish about like we're talking about broadcasting a lot on this like mini episode, and we're talking about like ESPN and like how they've marketed events and stuff. I really and I've been a proponent about this. The two things that I think hurt boxing a lot, and in two boxing's credit, they have fights on local TV now. They have fights on Fox, right? PBC's on Fox, ESPN does Top Rank. They have a lot more fights, like not the prelims. Like UFC has prelims on ESPN, but
Right.
like the actual full fights, other than the big events, not on pay-per-view. I think the two things that have hurt boxing and the UFC the most, and I honestly, yeah, I would say both of them. I think the streaming services have hurt. I think the paper, like the Zone, ESPN Plus, there's a bunch more. UFC Fight Pass. Like I don't love that. I've never liked the pay-per-view model. I think the pay-per-view model is dumb. I've always said, like, imagine putting like Conor Poirier on ABC,
Oh,
right?
if you put Conor Poirier on ABC, that shit would get so many views.
Right, and so much more than you would on a
So
pay-per-view.
many views, and you could be like, if they were able to make a deal, like I have had the same thought before. I'm like, in this day and age, if you made a deal with ABC,
You
that
do put
like
fights on ABC already. You do, but they're
Right.
just random fight nights. Like,
If
put
you-
the pay-per-views that aren't pay-per-views. Don't make them pay-per-view. Make them
you-
on ABC.
do like and maybe not every single pay-per-view, but like to keep them special, you like do maybe, I don't know, 5 a year, but they're like, these are badass cards. You call them like, I don't know,
Ultimate cards.
You call them like hella super stacked fights of doom. I don't know. Something crazy UFC would call it. But like, and you go to the Bills. You make these like, maybe you call them rivalry cards. You go and you get like the best rivals to fight each other in the history. You do, I don't know, Diaz McGregor 3.
Or what is it, 4
Bruh.
now? Yeah, you do.
Think about if you got those two motherfuckers to go out and fight each other again,
and have it be on. I'm not talking about ESPN. I'm talking
Right.
about ABC.
Have it on ABC.
Local TV.
Oh my god! Everyone would be like, anybody who has any idea about that feud would be like, "This is free." Like,
Yeah, basically free.
And then you know what UFC does? They go to ABC and they go, "Look, we will give you so many views for this time slot. Here's what we want. We want $1 bajillion. We want advertisement. We want this, that, and the other." And ABC would probably go, "Sure."
I mean, they already have the deal with the ESPN, so they do cards on ABC. I just have a hard time understanding. Like, this is why the NFL is what the this is what the NFL does. This is what the NBA does. There's the NHL now. Even they're gonna the Stanley Cup Finals are gonna be on ABC.
Yeah.
The NBA Finals just watched on ABC. We'll obviously get more to the actual NBA Finals on our full show on Friday, but like the NFL is king with this because they're doing Amazon Prime and they are going into the streaming thing for good reason. But Sunday it's Fox, CBS, NBC. Monday nights now are going to be on ABC. Thursday nights are on Fox. They're going to be on Amazon, but even that I think is a good proponent for them. They know what they're doing there. Like, this is what the NFL does. They care about the product seeing as many eyeballs as possible. Like, imagine if the NFL was on a pay-per-view model.
Well, that's why that's kind of why I think UFC might die off soon in terms of popularity.
I think it already has because of the ESPN Plus deal.
Well, that and the fact that, like, I don't know why I really don't know why anybody still uses a pay-per-view model. I mean, hell, the company that invented pay-per-view, WWE, they literally invented pay-per-view. Their very first WrestleMania was the first instance of what became pay-per-view.
They popularized pay-per-view.
Right. The company that popularized it doesn't even use it anymore. They
use Peacock, but it's like
Peacock, which is shite, as Conor McGregor would say.
Peacock isn't that great.
But they still do. Yes, they still offer pay-per-view free for this. You can buy it for $54.99. But why would you do that when you could get it on Peacock? And the fact is, WWE is so ahead of the here's the thing. WWE, yes, they're $1 million. You know what is also worth $1 million? UFC. I'm sure if you asked UFC if they could afford to not have people paying for pay-per-views, you know what they would probably say? Yeah, we'd get by. We would still make millions off of advertisements because we're the freaking UFC.
I think the biggest thing too, and this is something that I've always appreciated with the WWE. Obviously, WWE Network is still international, and obviously they're on Peacock now, which I think is a pretty good deal ultimately for both sides. But like even ESPN Plus, like I would pay extra for ESPN Plus. Like they're even doing price hikes for ESPN Plus now. I'm like, you're not gonna give me the pay-per-views. Why am I doing all these price hikes for it? But it's like, imagine you're paying, oh my God, an extra $5, but you get all the pay-per-views. I think everyone would be in on that.
Yeah, I would pay money. I'd pay that much money
just to get all the, you get 12 pay-per-views a year. And let's say it's like $25. You get 12 pay-per-views.
Here's the thing. I would rather pay for a solid service that I know I'm going to get a good image on my stream rather than using a illegal or a restream.
But and that's part of the problem with this streaming service thing. They're not necessarily entirely refined. Like even with WWE, with the stuff on Peacock, the first few events on ESPN Plus, the quality is terrible.
Yeah, what's crazy is when they stopped WWE Network, it was great. They had gotten it to a point where they had refined it to it was great. And
it was really good. I had WWE Network for a few months. It was great.
Because at the beginning, I got it at the very beginning, and I had it all the way to the end. Man, it was a mess at the beginning. They were trying to figure out the visuals. They were trying to figure out what the quality to have it at, how to get all these people onto a server. But like, my thing is, if WWE can do it, UFC can surely do it,
and boxing can also surely do it.
Oh yeah, but like the thing is, boxing is
it's not the level.
Boxing isn't even. It's not even a really a thing that people care. Boxing is. It's really funny. People used to think that UFC is the sport of degenerates. Boxing is the sport of degenerates. Honestly, like
at this era, yeah.
At this point, like it used to be
because there are only like three. There's only. I'm being real with you,
right?
When I'm talking about boxing, I watch 2 to 3 pay-per-views a year of boxing.
I don't watch like
that's about it.
Yeah, the thing with boxing is you would have to put like a good card in front of me. Like the last true boxing fight I watched was I watched Logan Paul Mayweather. That's not really a fight. I watched Mayweather McGregor. That was the last boxing fight I watched.
And here's the reality too with boxing and UFC when we're talking about cards as well. Like the UFC events, they're like events because their cards are good most often than not. They're not as great in quality.
Sometimes they're bad, but
they're not in great quality as they used to at the beginning of the ESPN Plus era, at the beginning of the Fox era.
We did get spoiled during COVID because they stacked those cards during like the beginning of COVID. But like you think about ESPN on Fox
or the UFC on Fox.
Every one of those cards were pretty much like just stacked after stacked after stacked.
At least at the beginning.
Like at the beginning. Now, like the thing is, they're giving pretty good, like the actual main card. Most of the time is good. I find with the ESPN era. With the ESPN era. But I don't know. The thing for me with UFC is I'll watch a card for UFC because I know something entertaining is going to go down.
Right.
Boxing is just like, I don't know, maybe someone will like knock someone out real crazy like, and I'll be like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like once maybe.
Right. But my point here is that like boxing, this is also a huge problem with the pay-per-view model for boxing is that like boxing, you're only getting the card for Mayweather McGregor.
Right.
But you're not even the main cards are not worth your time and you're paying $60. Like I've always disliked that about boxing. Because I remember watching the prelims for Mayweather McGregor and going like, And it was on Fox. Like they put that on Fox because of the UFC deal at the time.
Well, I sometimes
And I was
wonder,
like, ugh.
You know what I sometimes wonder?
What?
I sometimes wonder what would happen to boxing if someone was to come in and say, I'm gonna do what UFC did and bring all the boxing organizations, the professional, like the big name boxing orgs, together. Put them under one umbrella. We're gonna advertise it. We're gonna keep it in people's brains. We're gonna have people think about boxing again. Because boxing is not advertised.
It's not really advertised well. It's not advertised well. It's advertised, but it ain't advertised well even for the big events.
Boxing just shows up. Like to me, I'll be watching it on like late night and it'll be like, oh, it's like boxing from Las Vegas and it's some random Mexican org that's like having their belts like be defended. I'm like, this is impressive. It's like some dude who's been undefeated for like 3 years. That might be something you want to advertise.
Right, like, but it's like even guys like one of my favorite guys is like Shakur Stevenson. Shakur Stevenson is amazing. And like Caleb Plant's a guy I always say go watch. Canelo, of course, Floyd, of course. But like what you're saying is here's how I would do it. If I would say, hey, Bob Arum, hey, Golden Boy, hey, guys, we're done. Like why are we having dinners with the refs the night before? Nah, we're done. Out. Let's stop with this. And I would say, okay, let's get everyone into one umbrella. Let's stop with the constant belts, the division, like way too many divisions. Why do we need a junior lightweight, a lightweight, a super lightweight? Oh, no. Just give me like a lightweight division, maybe a like kind of similar to the UFC. Give me one belt, no magazine belt, no this, nah, one belt. And if I would do exactly what Dana White did with the UFC, I'm going to have the best guys fight. I don't care what their team says. I'll pay you as much as you want. I'll get ESPN involved. I get ESPN involved so I can make as much money as possible. I even get Fox involved. Sure, I'll split it, whatever. Because they did that with oh my God, with the Fury fight, right? With Fury Wilder.
Right,
Fox and ESPN split the coverage. And it was great because they split the coverage. Anyway, they need to do that more. They need to do that more. They need to do that more.
That's kind of what I'm going for with like the whole like advertising more, because like as a communications person, I'm just sitting here, I'm like this is such an easy fix. Like all you do is you advertise it more, you bring everybody together, you make it, you basically restart it. You scrap the belts. I agree with you. You scrap the belts. You do all that stuff.
Scrap all these divisions.
You all the divisions. You scrap all the different like organizations that there are. You have your top, and then you go UFC style. You go, all right, we're gonna have a tournament. We're gonna have a couple belts. It's gonna be all, and we're
gonna have like 6-7 divisions.
Have like all one the best guys. Divisions. We're gonna have all the boxers who are there can fight in this tournament. And the tournament, depending on how well you do, will rank you, and then that's where you start in the line.
You know what? Even is to scrap that. Even I have like the same thing with the UFC does. Now, obviously, this isn't perfect because who cares about rankings? But like, I have the media rank them, and then, but even then, it's not perfect. But like, we know what fights we want to see.
Right.
In boxing, we know we want to see Fury Wilder. Why did it take him 6 months?
Well, it's also like the situation where when fans watch like a UFC fight, usually you know what happens when people like a fight? That person eventually makes it to a championship fight. Right. Because people are like, hey, we want this person to have a shot because they're good.
And we want them to fight now, not in. Right. We want them to fight like we see this all the time in boxing. Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, perfect example. They fought 10 years later than they should have. Like it's again, I'm gonna keep repeating that because that's the reality. And then the UFC is like, oh yeah, Khabib McGregor, we ain't gonna wait 10 years for this. Yeah. We're doing it now. We're doing it in
Right.
2 months or 4 months. We're
Yeah.
not doing it in 10 years. Like, that's the problem with boxing. Like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's stupid. It's dumb. And
Anyway.
I mean, again, this is not just us saying it. This is the reality of boxing. And like it also, yeah, I put the fights on ABC. Sure. I put them on ESPN. Sure. I put them on Fox. Sure. They already have those contracts in place. Let me just take those contracts over and then actually give you good fights. Like, and then when you talk about the promotional piece, like Fox just randomly promotes their PBC cards. They're so random. Like, it's just like, oh, here's this title fight. And here's these two guys I know nothing about in a 30-second commercial. It's not interesting. So, yeah, that's the reality. I think we're all in agreement. I think everyone's in agreement with how these sports should change. And hopefully that will happen over time. I think the UFC will learn to move away from the pay-per-view model. I think they already are trying to do that with ESPN Plus, but we'll see. Anyways, any other final notes before we head out?
No, I think that's it.
I think that's it. We did a pretty good show, and then we're back on Friday to talk about the NBA Finals and everything else as well. So expect that on Friday afternoon. All right. See you, Brandon. Thanks for a great show as always.
Yep.
Have a great rest of your